From a mechanic gameplay standpoint, I've been enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 more than DnD, and this is from the perspective of a highly optimized DnD player, a person that have tried to balance DnD for about 2 years, and a forever DM that wishes my players to have the most fun possible. Hello there, my name is Thiet, and I'm here today to share with you how Baldur's Gate 3 achieves better balance between martials and casters, and giving a lot of fun options and quality of life improvement to players. In this video, I've compiled a list of things and my reasons for including them. I intend to bring these things to my DnD games, and perhaps I can convince you into doing so as well. Thank you to all the viewers who continue to watch and support my content. And thank you to everyone who supports me on YouTube membership and Patreon for aiding me financially on the path of building a friendly and thriving TTRPG community in Vietnam, especially Village from Chân Nhân tier, Đường and Nuni from Hiệp Sĩ tier. The first among things that I will bring from BG3 to my DnD game, and oh yes please, weapon actions. This I love! It helps Martial do a bit more utility rather than just I attack, enter. For people that are not sure what I'm referring to, I'm talking about the special abilities in BG3 that are tied to specific type of weapons that we can do once per short rest. For example, while holding a spear, once per short rest, we can rush out of melee without triggering opportunity attack and immediately attack another enemy at the location we rushed over. We can cleave and hit up to 3 enemies for reduced damage while holding a great axe, once per short rest. We can hit with the pommel of our great sword using a bonus action, once per short rest. Yeah, exciting stuff that weapon users have access to. My gripes between martials and casters in DnD is beyond just the fact that they are unbalanced. On side note, if you have questions on why martials and casters in DnD are unbalanced, then there are many people smarter than me already spoken about that topic in depth. I can link those videos in the comments and descriptions for your convenience. Back to our videos. I was saying my gripes between martials and casters in DnD is beyond just the fact that they are unbalanced. It's also because martials just don't have as many options to do in combat as casters. They are one note from the beginning of the game until the end of the game. They attack. Furthermore, in DnD, there is next to zero distinction between a battle axe and a long sword, between a halberd and a glaive, between a short sword and a scimitar. What's the point of having a variety of weapons if they are one and the same? So, weapon actions, to me, is a welcome change. I have compiled all the weapon actions from BG3 and rewrite them into familiar DnD feature language. You can access that Google Doc from my description or comment. That document is also available in my Vietnamese TTRPG Discord server, Funky Dungeon Master. Hope to see you there to hang out and to play some TTRPG in Vietnamese with us. Now, I gotta say this. Weapon actions still doesn't make martials quite where I want them to be, but it's a step in the right direction. And this is also where all weapon coatings and different types of arrows come into play. And oh man, utility arrows in Baldur's Gate 3. Arcane interference, fire arrow, ice arrow, acid arrow, thunder, slaying arrows of specific types of enemies, arrows of many target, arrow of transposition, arrow of salving. Oh my. We may find a recurring theme here. Give martials more options in combat, rather than just attacking. Options to debuff enemies, to teleport, to save an ally, and of course, to deal even more damage if they wish to. If anything, that makes them more fun to play. And while we're on the topic of coatings and special arrows, this is a perfect transition to my next point. The second thing I'd like to bring from BG3 to DnD, and I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised by this. More magic items. In BG3, it's incredibly fun to find new shiny magic items around every corner, every mission, every chest. Many of them has unique properties rather than just some boring +1 or +2 items. The magic item doesn't have to be very powerful, just a simple bonus like +10 move speed, +1 to constitution saving throws, a pike that returns when we throw it, an item that has one special spell or ability that can be used once per short rest. Then there are helmets that increase the chance of critting when we are obscured, armor that retaliates 1d4 fire damage when hit, and then there's a whole load of lightning items, radiant items, cold items, thunder or reverberation items. It's satisfying to figure out which magic item works well with which ones combine into a whole set that complements a build or a character concept. And of course, since potions, weapon coatings, and special arrows are also under the category of magic items, I advocate for giving players more of those toys as well. Now for me, personally, I've been a bit more on the conservative side when it comes to magic items in the campaigns I DM. Not entirely sure why, probably just because I don't feel very inspired by simple +1 or +2 weapons or armor, and I feel discouraged by looking at the official DnD magic items that are quite unbalanced. But after experiencing the joy of mixing and matching which helmet goes with these gloves, who uses which magic item best, it even sparked some cool conversation between my BG3 multiplayer party members. I am glad to say that BG3 has given me a slap in the face to snap me out of the stingy DM mindset. It inspired me to just throw a bunch of minor magic items at players, then let them have the fun of choosing which one they would like to use. Sometimes experiencing something just changes your perspective. Though, I would not recommend using the BG3 system of many magic item slots, like helmet slot, glove slot, shoes, necklace, or ring, but rather keep the 3 attunement slot system in DnD so it's easier to keep track. This is purely to make playing DnD combat faster. In Baldur's Gate 3, the computer is keeping track of and triggering different magical effects, items, statuses for us. It never forgets. But on the tabletop setting, we have to remember everything ourselves. Having too many magic items in use at the same time have the risk of slowing combat down. Okay, let me just figure out the extra damage type and damage die from my ring. Wait, that guy should have made a dex save or take some radiant damage from hitting me while wearing this helmet, which then triggers a radiating orb condition on him, and whenever he takes a condition from me, and so on. You can probably see how painful this could get when we have 4 or 5 magic items on our hand at the same time, along with a plethora of potions, coatings, and magic arrows in our bags. And this, again, flow directly into the next thing on my list to bring over from BG3. When we have that many potions and coatings in our bag, let's allow the players to use potions and coatings with a bonus action. Potions are meant to be used, not just hoarded. Though, I'll be the first to admit, I usually like hoarding stuff and never use them even after the final battle. Especially those explosive barrels in BG3, you know. Talking about hoarding stuff for the next campaign, am I right? Now, if a potion takes just a bonus action to use, rather than an action like in DnD right now, then it would encourage players to use potions more in combat. We don't have to sacrifice much of our precious action economy to use potions anymore, after all. And that is exactly the kind of behavior we want to encourage. Furthermore, it gives everyone meaningful bonus action options. The character builds that don't optimize to constantly use the bonus actions now can be more impactful too. I think that about sums up this point. I was on the fence between the action and bonus action camps for potion usage before, but BG3 once again rolls a nat 20 persuasion check for me. bonus action it is. Administering potion to other people or throwing potion still requires an action though. Or if a character has extra attack, throwing a potion only costs one of their attacks. Because, well, you throw them and that's an attack. Another sneaky quality of life buff from Martials. Okay, now that we're properly warmed up, let's dive into the more spicy things that I would like to bring from BG3 to DnD. You ready? You ready? A character brought up from Unconcious cannot use their action on their very next turn. Let me repeat that. A character that has recently been brought up from being unconscious cannot use their action on their very next turn. Okay. I can already hear the sweaty keyboards clanking about how terrible my suggestion is and how terrible my technique is. I like it. And let me explain. By doing this, I want to disincentivize, big word. I want to discourage the yo-yo effect, where a character gets pummeled down and then gets healing word up constantly. Down, up, down, up. That gameplay loop, the yo-yo effect, is weird for me. It is a personal pet peeve. I know, it's a fantasy, it doesn't need the realness of real life. But there's some fantasy I like fighting a dragon, and some fantasy I don't like and don't want to include in my game, like getting in and out of consciousness 2 times in a row or more in a mere few seconds. There are plenty of heroics to be had that doesn't involve that. This does not mean I am opposed to a character coming back from near death in an epic fight to continue fighting. I am for it. I would just much rather a character to be burst healed, a lot of HP, and can fight for several more rounds before getting knocked down again. And that could be accomplished by the abundance of potions that we discussed earlier. Everything is working nicely here. The next spicy one. Players can use their reactionary abilities with full relevant information. And by reactionary abilities, I mean something like spending a bardic inspiration given to them, cunning words, counter spell. I want to give players all the necessary information before they decide to use those abilities. Such a quality of life improvement. I am all for it. In my past D&D games, we always had some problems with information for counterspell specifically. We see counterspell as kinda strong, so we try to keep the information about the spell we're casting secret. For example, we would say, I cast a spell, and the counterspeller for both players and DMs. Then, we try to use an Arcana check to see if people can identify a spell or not. But I just hate that the flow of combat in D&D is slowed down significantly. And worst of all, it creates an unintentional air of rivalry between players and DM. In a very tense scenario, life and death for player characters, people would try to read others for any knowledge possible to gain tactical advantage. I simply don't want that atmosphere at my table. So, boom! Now, player knows the spells that enemies are casting. Players know the AC of enemies, DC of the saving throws, of the ability checks. Players know what enemies rolled. And likewise, enemies know those information from players. Now we can all use our reactionary abilities as we wish. Tactically, is counterspell still a strong spell? Yes, it is. But is everyone at the table happier with how the combat flows? Also, yes. And that's a win for me. Now, side note, if you want to do something to the spell counterspell to make it more balanced, then its new version in the 1D&D playtest 7 is pretty good. I'll link to that in the description and in the comments below. But that is beyond the scope of this video. And And there's only one big thing remaining that I want to bring from BG3 to DnD. But before that, let me quickly mention all the other minor things that I would like to bring as well. Use more elevation in battle map. That's just chef kiss. We normally don't use this at the table because it's not very convenient to convey that information on a 2D map. But I noticed that it makes movement in combat more dynamic, tactical, fun, a bit more of a puzzle. How do we get from here to there? How do we properly use the high ground and cover to our advantage? Next, the unstoppable condition. If the creature with the unstoppable condition is damaged, the damage instance is reduced to 1. Then the condition is removed. A creature can have many stacks of unstoppable, and the players need to remove these stacks with light pokes before dealing big damage. It's not a system-wide thing, just a cool boss mechanics that I want to use. Next, AoE Potion. Potions, when thrown to the ground, can benefit many people that stands near where it breaks. Sure, make it 10 feet by 10 feet square when thrown to the ground. It's very effective out of combat healing, and it could make for interesting positioning in combat. And honorable mention of things that I think about for a fair amount of time, but ultimately decided not to bring to DnD. The controversial Prone gives Unconcious, it ends concentration and ends a turn. I actually gives the single aspect of Prone ending concentration a fair bit of thought. Is this way of nerfing spells and casters healthy for the game? The answer is sadly no, since most prominent ways to inflict the prone condition on someone is to shove them in melee with athletics, and casters don't usually stay there much anyway. Spells and abilities that inflict the prone condition usually requires an attack to hit first, which is easily avoidable by just increasing AC. It encourages even more casters to dip for armor. Not good. Next, limitless weapon swapping between melee and ranged in one turn. No. While this is a quality of life improvement, there's a clearly optimized way of using this. Swapping to the melee weapon set that includes a shield at the end of your turn. This exclusively buffs ranged characters. I generally think that melee is fun, and I generally try to encourage that more. If we bring the limitless weapon swapping between melee and ranged over to DnD, then that would be against my values. Next, respec, meaning changing your build for 100 gold. No, if we don't like playing a certain build, have a conversation with the DM and we can resolve that on case-by-case basis. If it's a newbie player that's not used to the mechanics yet and choosing a class or subclass that's not up to their imagination, I let them respec for free. But making it a mechanics of the game that can be used whenever, that costs in-game gold. Nah. For me, it comes at too much of a cost for immersion and too finicky to deal with. And now, finally, we've arrived to the last big thing I want to bring from BG3 to DnD. Instant short rest. Well, almost. You'll see. And limited to twice per long rest only. In BG3, we can short rest instantly when we are not in combat or in a cutscene. I love this. Short rest in DnD campaign is not often used, mostly because case number 1, we have one big fight, then we go home, have a long rest. Case number 2, we are in a series of combats that are time sensitive, or we're in a dangerous dungeon that monsters can just wander around. We don't have the time to sit down for 1 hour. What we are trying to accomplish here is to encourage more of short rest usage in case number 2, and in order to do so, we just have to follow BG3 example of making a short rest more time efficient. Let's make it 1 minute and only allow 2 short rests per long rest. Since it takes 1 minute, it's near impossible to be used in combat. It's also hard to be used in the middle of a conversation, aka a cutscene. Now that's exactly how BG3 executed it. You may ask, why 1 minute? It's so short. 1 hour seems like a more reasonable time for an adventurer to sit down and recover. And to that, I'll respond, 1. It's just a game mechanic. 2. Why do we assume that a fantasy hero needs to rest for an hour? We can just easily explain that since the heroes are so heroic, they need but a quick moment to center their breathing and they will feel refreshed and ready to adventure once more.
Lovely little pick-me-up.
I think we are simply attached to the idea of 1 hour short rest because we see it first and we are used to it in DnD. You may also ask, why twice per long rest? That's so immersion breaking, why can I only rest twice? Once again, I'll respond, we don't really need to question it. Just like we don't ask why a level 1 wizard has 2 level 1 spell slots. Why a level 2 fighter has 1 action search per short rest. It's a game mechanic. It's how things are balanced in a game. WotC recommends that an adventuring day has 2 short rests. And apparently that's what WotC tries to balance their class features around. So, 2 short rests it is. Okay, let's sum it all up. That was my list of big things I want to bring from BG3 to DnD. Weapon actions, aka special abilities for weapons, more magic items, potion as bonus action. A character coming back up from unconscious would lose their next action. Give players all the relevant information on a reactionary ability. And 1 minute short rest. What do you think? Did they miss any cool things that could also be brought over? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to engage in civil discussion with you guys to improve our DnD gaming experience together.